70 men kneel in the dirt of Ophrah, their necks pressed against the cold, unyielding surface of a single rock. It is a mass execution carried out not by a foreign invader, but by flesh and blood. One by one, the sons of the great judge Gideon are dragged forward, one by one. Abimelech murders his own brothers to seize a crown the nation was never supposed to wear. 70 men die on one stone. But the text leaves a fragment, a crack in the slaughter. Read that again. One son, the youngest, slips the blade. His name is Jotham. He is a fugitive, hunted, outmatched, and utterly alone. Yet what he does next defies every rule of geography, theology, and survival. He does not flee to the wilderness to raise an army. He does not beg for asylum. He walks straight toward the city that funded the murder of his family. See the scene. The men of Shechem are gathering by an oak tree to crown the murderer, and Jotham climbs a mountain. But he does not climb just any mountain. He scales Mount Gerizim, the mountain of blessing. Why did a lone survivor climb the exact peak designated by Moses for divine favor to scream a bizarre botanical curse into the wind, a curse that would lie completely dead for 3 years before waking up to burn the city to the ground? Judges chapter 9, verse 5 inches, the King James Version, locks the physical anchor in place. And he went unto his father's house at Ophrah, and slew his brethren the sons of Jerubbaal, being 70 persons, upon one stone. Notwithstanding yet Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. Stop right there. Notice the object, the stone. In Hebrew, the word is Aben. It is not a battlefield. It is an altar of slaughter. This is a corruption of sacrifice. Abimelech has turned a single rock in his father's hometown into an execution block, offering his brother's blood for political power. That stone is where the curse begins. And if you watch the text closely, you will see that a stone is exactly where the curse must end. Picture it. The blood is still wet on the rock at Ophrah. Meanwhile, miles away, the city of Shechem is celebrating. They have bankrolled Abimelech with silver taken straight from the temple of their idol, Baal-berith. Flavius Josephus, the 1st century Jewish historian, records in his Antiquities of the Jews that Shechem was a place vibrating with intense political volatility, a fortified stronghold that had grown arrogant, wealthy, and dangerous. They do not care about the blood on the stone. They only care about the crown. Judges 9-7 records the survivor's next move. And when they told it to Jotham, he went and stood in the top of Mount Gerizim, and lifted up his voice, and cried, and said unto them, Hearken unto me, ye men of Shechem, that God may hearken unto you. He stands on the precipice. Below him is the valley, echoing with the coronation of the man who butchered his brothers. Above him is the open sky. Remember Deuteronomy. Moses had stood the tribes of Israel on 2 mountains decades earlier, Mount Ebal for the curse, Mount Gerizim for the blessing. Jotham takes the mountain of blessing and reverses it. Same peak, same valley. A devastating reversal. He is going to tell them a story about trees. To the men in the valley, it sounds like a child's fable. It is not. It is a loaded weapon. The blood is crying out from the stone at Ophrah, but the weapon forged to avenge it is a parable spoken from the heights. How does a story about plants dismantle an entire military stronghold? Wind cuts across the limestone ridge of Mount Gerizim. The valley floor below is thick with the noise of a coronation. Jotham stands at the absolute edge of the cliff, looking down at the oak of the pillar in Shechem. He has no army at his back. He has no weapons in his hands. He has only the clothes he wore when he crawled out of his hiding place. and the memory of 70 brothers bleeding out on a single rock. He is a hunted man. The city below him bankrolled the massacre. If Abimelech's soldiers look up and spot him, he is a dead man. Yet Jotham does not hide. He climbs to the highest, most visible point in the region and prepares to speak. But he chooses his stage with terrifying precision. Moses built a divine system for this exact piece of earth. Look at the cross reference in Deuteronomy 27, verse 12. These shall stand upon Mount Gerizim to bless the people when ye are come over Jordan, Simeon and Levi and Judah and Issachar and Joseph and Benjamin. Read that again. Gerizim is the peak of divine favor. Across the narrow valley sits Mount Ebal, the mountain of the curse. If you are going to damn a city, you stand on Ebal. That is the rule. Jotham breaks it. He stands on the soil of blessing to pronounce an inescapable death sentence. A pure reversal. He takes the holy ground of Israel and turns it into a platform for destruction. Watch what the text does with the landscape. Below him, the men of Shechem are gathered at the oak of the pillar. Why that specific tree? Because of what is buried beneath it. Decades earlier, in Joshua 24, Joshua made a covenant with Israel at this exact location. He took a great stone in Hebrew, an eben, and set it up under the oak by the sanctuary of the Lord. It was meant to be a permanent witness against the people if they ever turned to idols. Picture it. The men of Shechem are crowning a murderer while standing directly on top of the very stone meant to testify against them. Two stones. The blood-soaked Eben at Ophrah and the silent, buried Eben at Shechem. The rock of execution and the rock of witness. Both have been violated. So Jotham speaks. The acoustic geography of the valley between Gerizim and Ebal forms a natural amphitheater. His voice carries perfectly on the wind, dropping from the heights directly into the pagan coronation. He does not scream insults. He does not threaten them with a sword he does not have. He tells a story. Judges 9-8 begins the strike. The trees went forth on a time to anoint a king over them, and they said unto the olive tree, Reign thou over us. Stop right there. It sounds like a fable, a children's story spoken to hardened killers. But this is not entertainment. Jotham is weaponizing the natural world. He takes the political reality of Shechem and translates it into the language of the forest. The men in the valley are desperate for a ruler, so Jotham shows them trees doing the exact same thing. I hold this as one reading, not the final word, but ancient Jewish commentary suggests Jotham is diagnosing a profound spiritual sickness. The trees of the field approach the most deeply rooted, valuable plants in the ancient world. They beg for a master. The olive, the fig, and the vine are offered supreme political power. They are handed the crown of the forest. But their response to the trees reveals a secret about how heaven views earthly kingship. Why do the greatest trees in the garden violently reject the throne? The olive tree is the anchor of the ancient economy. It gives light, it gives food, it anoints priests. When the trees of the forest come begging for a king, they go to the olive first. Judges 9-9 records the answer echoing down the limestone cliffs of Gerizim. But the olive tree said unto them, Should I leave my fatness, wherewith by me they honor God and man, and go to be promoted over the trees? Stop right there. Look at that phrase in English, promoted over. It sounds like an elevation, a step up in power. But turn the English back into the Hebrew Jotham is speaking. The word is nuah. It does not mean to rule, to govern, or to build. It means to wave, to sway, to shake, to wander aimlessly in the wind. Read that again. The olive tree is saying, Why would I abandon the heavy, oil-producing weight of my divine purpose, just to sway violently in the wind over the rest of you? To the olive tree, Kingship is not an elevation. It is a loss of substance. It is an empty, restless motion. The forest moves on. The trees approach the fig. The fig gives the exact same refusal, unwilling to surrender its sweetness to wave in the wind. Desperate, they go to the vine. The vine rejects them too. None of the noble, fruit-bearing plants will take the crown. See the scene. Jotham is not just inventing a fable, he is weaponizing his own family's history. Just one chapter earlier, the men of Israel came to Jotham's father, Gideon, and offered him this exact crown. They said, "Rule over us, you and your son." Gideon's answer in Judges 8:23 is the theology the trees are built on. "I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you." The olive, the fig, and the vine are echoing Gideon. They know who the true king is, Targum Jonathan. The ancient Aramaic paraphrase of the Hebrew Bible translates this sequence with a subtle linguistic shift. The Aramaic renders the tree's refusal not merely as a personal preference, but as a cosmic boundary. To take the crown is to abandon the sanctuary. I hold this as their telling, not as proven fact. But the Targum suggests that stepping into human kingship requires stepping out of the divine order. The noble trees refuse to fall, so the forest is left desperate. They need a ruler. They are addicted to the idea of a king. If the plants of substance will not lead them, they will scrape the bottom of the earth to find something that will. Picture it. The men of Shechem are standing in the valley, listening to this lone survivor dismantle their entire political structure. They have just crowned Abimelech. They thought they were crowning an olive tree. Jotham is about to tell them what they actually crowned. The noble trees have turned their backs. The forest is out of options. Where do desperate men go when true authority refuses to sway in the wind for them? The valley floor is dead quiet. The olive, the fig, and the vine have walked away, refusing to sway in the wind. But the trees of Jotham's parable are frantic. They are so addicted to the idea of a king that they are willing to scrape the dirt to find one. Judges 9:14 brings the story to its terrifying conclusion. Then said all the trees unto the bramble, "Come thou, and reign over us." Stop right there. Look at that word in Hebrew, atad. It translates to the bramble, or specifically, the Palestinian buckthorn. It is not a tree. It is a creeping, violent weed. It produces no fruit to eat, no oil to burn, no wine to drink. Its branches are covered in vicious spikes. The atad survives by choking out the root systems of everything planted around it. This is Abimelech. He is the thorn bush. He produced nothing but the blood on the stone at Ophrah, choking out 70 of his own brothers just to make room for his roots. Picture the arrogance of the weed when it is finally offered the crown. Judges 9:15. And the bramble said unto the trees, "If in truth ye anoint me king over you, then come and put your trust in my shadow. And if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon." Read that again. The bramble offers its shadow. Sit with that. A buckthorn is a few feet high, sparse, and brittle in the summer sun. It casts no shade. It is a botanical impossibility, a dark, sarcastic joke echoing down the limestone walls of Gerizim. The bramble is demanding that the massive, towering trees of the forest bow down into the dirt just to fit underneath its pathetic shadow. It is promising a protection it is physically incapable of giving, pure reversal. But it is the second half of the verse that turns the fable into a weapon. The atad makes a threat. If the trees will not bow, fire will come out of the bramble. In the ancient Near East, the buckthorn was notorious for exactly one thing. It is incredibly combustible. It dries out in the heat and turns into natural kindling. The Psalms speak of this rapid, uncontrollable burning. Psalm 58, verse 9, warns how fast the thorns catch fire before the pots can even feel the heat. Same plant, same fire. I hold this as one reading, a study of the ancient landscape, but the botanical reality is clear. You do not build a house with a bramble. You do not eat from it. You only burn it. Jotham is telling the men of Shechem that the man they just crowned above the buried rock of witness is nothing but dry wood. The parable is finished, but Jotham has one final, devastating translation for the men who funded the slaughter. He is about to bind the destiny of the city to the combustible nature of the weed they chose. How does a thorn bush burn down the tallest trees in the forest? Jotham stands on the precipice of Gerizim and drops the metaphor. The language of the forest vanishes from the wind. He looks down at the men of Shechem and the house of Millo, the heavily fortified citadel guarding the valley, and he binds them permanently to the weed they have chosen. Judges 9:20 sets the trap. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and the house of Millo. And let fire come out from the men of Shechem and from the house of Millo and devour Abimelech. Stop right there. Look at the symmetry of the curse. It is a suicide pact. The bramble warned that fire would come out of it and devour the cedars of Lebanon. In biblical poetry, the cedars of Lebanon are the ultimate symbol of towering human pride, the elite, the untouchable nobles of the ancient world. Jotham is looking at the wealthy lords of Shechem and calling them the cedars. Same pride, same kindling. They think their silver and their thick walls protect them. They are wrong. Watch what the text does. Look at the Hebrew word translated devour. It is akal. It literally means to eat, to consume as food. Abimelech will feed on Shechem, and Shechem will feed on Abimelech. Jotham does not ask God to strike them with lightning. He does not summon an invading army from across the Jordan. The curse is entirely self-contained. The punishment for choosing a murderer as your king is that you get to keep him. Picture it. The men who funded the slaughter at Ophrah thought they were buying loyalty. They thought the stone was silenced. But Jotham prophesies a mutual consumption. The fire will start with Abimelech and burn Shechem. But the text doubles back. The fire will also start in Shechem and burn Abimelech. They will eat each other alive. I hold this as one reading of the ancient dynamics, but historians note the house of Millo was a military stronghold, built of heavy stone and massive timbers. It was designed to withstand a siege from the outside. It was never designed to survive a fire from the inside. Read that again. The destruction will not come from a foreign enemy. It will come from the alliance itself. The speech is finished. The curse is spoken. Jotham turns his back on the valley, descends the mountain of blessing, and runs for his life. Judges 9:21 says he fled to Beer, a distant sanctuary, and hid there for fear of Abimelech his brother. He vanishes from the biblical record. The lone survivor has fired his weapon, and now he disappears into the dust. And then nothing happens. See the scene. The men of Shechem go back to their pagan feast. Abimelech puts the crown on his head. The sun sets, the sun rises, and the city stands perfectly intact. No fire falls. No walls crack. The Bramble king reigns, and the stone at Ophrah is just a cold rock covered in dried blood. Heaven does not open. The earth does not swallow them. For 36 months, there is absolute terrifying silence. Two images, one murderer on a throne, one empty sky. But the curse is not dead, it is only waiting. Why does a judgment spoken from the mountain of blessing lie dormant for 3 years before an unseen terror finally fractures the alliance? 3 years of silence. The harvest comes and goes, The olive, the fig, and the vine yield their fruit in the valley of Shechem, and Abimelech collects the taxes. No fire falls from Gerizim. The blood on the execution rock at Ophrah fades into the dust. For 36 months, the men of Shechem look up at the mountain of blessing and laugh at the fugitive's curse. They think silence means heaven has forgotten. They are wrong. Heaven is not ignoring the murder. Heaven is letting the bramble dry out. Judges 9:22 and 23 break the illusion in two devastating sentences. When Abimelech had reigned 3 years over Israel, then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. And the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. Stop right there. Look at the mechanism of the judgment. God does not send an army, he sends a spirit. Turn the English back into the Hebrew. The phrase is ruach ra'ah. Ruach is wind, breath, or spirit. Ra'ah is ruin, adversity, or evil. This is not necessarily a demonic entity crawling out of the underworld. It is a divine wind of chaos. It is the exact same Ruach Ra'ah that torments King Saul years later in 1 Samuel 16 when the Spirit of the Lord departs from him. Same breath, same ruin. Picture it. You cannot see a wind, but you can see what it tears apart. The Ruach sweeps through the gates of Shechem, and paranoia infects the city. The alliance cracks. The men who funded Abimelech's rise now despise him. The text says they set ambushes for him in the mountains, robbing anyone who passes by, trying to choke off his trade routes. The bramble is turning on the cedars, and the cedars are turning on the bramble. I hold this as their telling, not as proven fact. But ancient Jewish commentators often point out the terrifying symmetry of divine justice here. The men of Shechem used 70 pieces of silver to hire assassins for Abimelech. Now, God uses the unseen currency of treachery to assassinate their loyalty. The weapon they use to build the king is the exact weapon God uses to unmake him. Watch what the text does next. The wind of chaos needs a spark. His name is Gal, the son of Ebed. He walks into Shechem during the grape harvest. The men of the city are drunk in the temple of their idol, cursing Abimelech. And Gal stands up and mocks the king's lineage. He tells the men of Shechem they are fools for bowing to the son of a maidservant. He dares Abimelech to come fight. The treachery is complete. The curse spoken on Mount Gerizim is no longer a metaphor waiting in the air. The trap has snapped shut. Abimelech hears of the rebellion, gathers his men, and marches on the city that crowned him. The Ruach has done its work. The bramble is dry, the cedars are ready to burn. But how does a prophecy about a thorn bush translate into an actual, physical inferno that consumes 1,000 lives? Dirt and salt fly through the air over the ruined walls of Shechem. Abimelech has slaughtered the men in the field, breached the gates, and leveled the city that crowned him. He is tearing down the stones of the houses and sowing the ground with salt, ensuring nothing will ever grow there again. The bramble is choking out the roots. But the massacre is not complete. The elite lords of the city, the very men Jotham called the Cedars of Lebanon, flee to a fortified structure outside the main walls. Judges 9:46 tracks their desperate retreat. And when all the men of the Tower of Shechem heard that, they entered into an hold of the house of the god Berith. Stop right there. Look at where they run. The house of Berith. This is the exact temple whose treasury funded Abimelech's mercenaries to murder the 70 brothers on the rock at Ophrah. They run back to the source of the silver, thinking the thick stone walls of the idol's fortress will save them. They think they are safe from the sword. They are. But the curse was never about a sword. The curse was about fire. See the scene. Abimelech does not bring battering rams. He does not waste men trying to scale the walls. He turns his army away from the fortress and marches them up Mount Zalmon, a wooded peak nearby. He takes an axe in his hand. Judges 9:48 records the terrifying literalization of the prophecy, and Abimelech took an axe in his hand, and hewed down a bough from the trees, and took it, and laid it on his shoulder, and said unto the people that were with him, What ye have seen me do, make haste, and do as I have done. I hold this as their telling, not as proven fact, but ancient Near Eastern military historians note that burning an enemy out of a stronghold was a tactic of absolute extermination, used only when no prisoners were meant to survive. Abimelech turns his entire army into a moving forest. Every soldier carries a dead branch. Watch what the text does. Jotham's parable is materializing before their eyes. The trees are being weaponized by the bramble. Abimelech, the thornbush king, commands the wood of the mountain, and the wood obeys. They carry the branches down to the Tower of Shechem. They pile the dead timber against the massive wooden doors and the stone walls of the hold, and they light the fire. Same curse, same fire. Judges 9:49 finishes the slaughter, and set the hold on fire upon them, so that all the men of the Tower of Shechem died also, about 1,000 men and women. Read that again. 1,000 lives choke on the smoke and burn in the temple of their God. The men of Shechem are entirely consumed by the king they created. The first half of Jotham's curse, spoken from Mount Gerizim, is now perfectly fulfilled. Fire has come out of the bramble and devoured the men of Shechem and the house of Millo. The city is ash. The rebellion is crushed. Abimelech stands victorious in the smoke, untouchable and unchallenged. But Jotham's prophecy was a two-way street, and the fire is still hungry. Shechem has burned, but how does the second half of the curse catch a king who has just won the war? The smoke is still rising from the ashes of Shechem when the Bramble king marches his army north. Abimelech is not satisfied with 1,000 dead in the temple. The bloodlust that started on the rock at Ophrah has consumed him entirely. He moves a few miles away to the neighboring city of Thebes, sets his camp against its walls, and violently breaches the outer defenses. But the people of Thebes know what happened at Shechem. They know you cannot reason with the bramble. You cannot negotiate with a fire. Judges 9:51 gives the architectural blueprint of the final stand. But there was a strong tower within the city, and thither fled all the men and women, and all they of the city, and shut it to them, and gat them up to the top of the tower. Stop right there. Look at the geometry of the battlefield. The people are trapped on the roof. Abimelech is on the ground. He has run this exact execution before. He knows exactly how to kill a tower. He just needs wood and a spark. The text does not say he sends his men to do the labor. His pride demands he be the one to light the fire. Jotham had prophesied that fire would come out of Shechem and devour Abimelech. But Shechem is dead. Abimelech believes he has outlived the curse. He is wrong. He is walking directly into its jaws. Watch what the text does in verse 52. And Abimelech came unto the tower, and fought against it, and went hard unto the door of the tower to burn it with fire. Same tactic, same fire, same arrogance. He stands at the base of the door, completely focused on the wood in front of him. But he forgets to look up. I hold this as one reading of ancient combat, but military historians note that standing directly against the doors of a fortified tower was a lethal tactical error. The walls were built with defensive angles specifically designed to allow those on the roof to drop heavy objects onto the attackers below. Abimelech is blinded by his own invincibility. He demands the trees of the forest bow down into his shadow, just as the parable warned. But the shadow falling over him right now does not belong to a tree. It belongs to a nameless woman standing on the edge of the roof. She has no sword. She has no bow. She is not a soldier, but she is holding a domestic object. that is about to become an instrument of absolute divine execution. In her hands is a piece of a millstone. Turn the English back into the Hebrew. The word used for this specific upper millstone is rekeb. It means the rider, the heavy, grinding top stone that crushes the grain against the stationary lower rock. But the root of both the upper and lower stones is that exact same word we left behind in the beginning of chapter 9. Eben, the stone. Read that again. The object, the stone. 70 brothers bled out on an Eben at Ophrah. The men of Shechem crowned a murderer on an Eben under the oak. Now a woman steps to the precipice of the Tower of Thebes, holding an Eben over the head of the man who swung the blade. Two images, one king with a torch, one woman with a rock. The fire is ready to ignite, but the gravity of the curse is already in motion. What happens when the weight of 70 murders finally drops from the sky? The woman leans over the edge of the parapet. She does not aim a bow. She does not shout a war cry. She simply lets go of the weight. Judges 9:53 records the impact. And a certain woman cast a piece of a millstone upon Abimelech's head, and all to break his skull. Stop right there. Turn the English back into the anatomy of the strike. The Hebrew phrase translated break his skull literally means to shatter the cranium, to cave it in entirely. The Bramble king is crushed into the dirt. He calls out desperately to his armor-bearer in the very next verse to run him through with a sword, terrified of the historical shame of dying by a woman's hand. But the sword is just a technicality. The stone has already done the work. Watch what the text does to close the ledger. Judges 9:56 and 57. Thus God rendered the wickedness of Abimelech, which he did unto his father, in slaying his 70 brethren. And all the evil of the men of Shechem did God render upon their heads, and upon them came the curse of Jotham the son of Jerubbaal. Read that again. The curse came upon them. The fire of Shechem's rebellion is exactly what drove Abimelech to this final wall, placing him perfectly beneath the drop. The bramble ate the cedars, and in the ashes it found its own executioner. Go back now to the dirt of Ophrah, where this film began. The 70 brothers kneeling, the blood soaking into the cold rock, the lone survivor running for his life. You have read this chapter 100 times as just another violent history of the ancient Near East. But tonight, you have a name for the mechanics of the justice. The execution block at Ophrah was not just an altar of slaughter. It was a pendulum. When Abimelech lifted the blade over his brothers, he pushed that Eben into the air. And for 3 years, that stone hung suspended over his head, held back only by the terrifying patience of heaven. Jotham climbed the mountain of blessing to prophesy its return, and the unseen wind of chaos made sure the bramble walked exactly to the place where gravity would finally pull it down. I hold this as one reading, a study of the ancient text's perfect symmetry, not the final word. But the physical reality of the judgment is inescapable. The blood on the stone was answered by a stone. The curse is resolved. The fire has burned itself out. But 20% of this mystery remains deliberately sealed. We know the botanical trap. We know the mechanism of the wind. But the text never records the name of the woman holding the millstone. Why her? Why that exact tower? On that exact day, the silent, absolute timing of heaven is a secret the dust of Thebes is still holding. If you made it to the end of this journey, comment the word "watched" below. Subscribe to the channel so we can track down the rest of these forgotten biblical anomalies together, and send this video to one person who loves deep biblical history but has never heard the curse of the Bramble King. A man can build a throne on top of a grave, but he can never outrun the stone that marks it.